G'day and welcome to the third episode of Practical Powerlifting. In today's episode, I get to chat with my longtime friend and extraordinary powerlifting coach, Alex Hayes. Alex, much like myself, has been in the powerlifting game for practically his whole adult life. And I would describe his career as a slow burn. And over the last few years especially, he has really grown into prominence. He has really thrived and flourished in his professional career. He coaches some of the best lifters in Australia. He's really earned his way there because, like I said, he's a very successful coach and he knows what he's doing. And one of the things that I really admire about Alex is that he's a no fluffs guy. He doesn't get sucked into fads. He doesn't get sucked into crazes or really short-term thinking. He's a very logical, very principled kind of coach. And you're going to learn a lot from this conversation. He really does a good job of dispelling what's important and what's not, showing us where to really focus your energy if you're a lifter, and if you're a coach, what kind of things aren't really worth, what rabbit holes aren't worth going down. And yeah, as you can see by the length of this episode, much like episode 2, it's a bit of a long one, but I assure you it's very much worth it because we get into some really interesting topics. Alex also runs his podcast Lift Talk, which he runs out of City Strength, and that's a very different style podcast. It's often news related, about the powerlifting world. There are more educational themes and topics there. But I think what we talk about in this episode is rather unique. And we've really tried to dive into Alex's coaching practice, how he actually goes about running his coaching service. And so whether you're a lifter or a coach, you're going to get a lot from this episode. So I hope you enjoy. Well, obviously I wanted to get you on here because this is what's going to be episode 3 of Practical Powerlifting. And you're one of the coaches, powerlifting figures in Australia who I respect more than anyone almost. I don't want to say the number one because your head's already as big as it can be, so I have to at least put some buffer in there.
Well, I mean, I'm number 3, right? Episode 3.
Episode 3, yeah. Episode 3, but I'm not going in
who's
order.
Ahead of me?
I'm not going in order of respect. I'm going in order of convenience, and you're a busy dad, so it's hard to get a hold of you. Before we get into some of the conversation topics that we have for today, I always find it funny when at the end of episodes, they'll do like plugs and shout outs. Let's just do that at the start. Let's just knock it out. Who are you? Where do people find you?
So my name's Alex Hayes. I'm a powerlifting coach from Sydney. Been working pretty much exclusively with powerlifters since 2016. So yeah, almost 10 years now just doing powerlifting, which is pretty cool. Before that, started just doing gen pop, personal training and stuff like that. Like I guess most coaches start in that way. So I'm the head coach and owner of Process Powerlifting Club. And yeah, we do online coaching. I also work out of City Strength HQ in Sydney, doing some face-to-face and group training as well.
And it's a pretty rare gig to be exclusively coaching powerlifting. I think like a lot of people, especially in the fitness industry, which is how you started, like, you don't, like you described, you started as a personal trainer, so to speak. And I guess I want to kind of get a little bit into your background and context, because I think that's important for people to understand like how you've kind of come to be who you are today. But yeah, it's not very common that a lot of people will go fully into powerlifting. Often it's powerlifting and bodybuilding or personal training with, 5 powerlifting clients that they have. Whereas your roster for the last almost 10 years has been exclusively powerlifters, from what I can understand. What were things like when you first started getting coaching, like first started powerlifting and coaching, like, and how, I want to kind of explore almost like how things have changed. Like, what was the scene like for the babies in powerlifting that don't really know what it was like in 2013, 14, 15? What was the fitness powerlifting scene like in Australia and Sydney?
So in Sydney, there was kind of like one main gym that had most of the powerlifters. That was Adonis Athletics, and there was like a few branches across Sydney. I ended up getting coaching by them for a short period. But back when I started, it was a lot of like learning online from people like Eric Helms and Lane Norton and Omar Isuf and guys like that on YouTube back in like 2012, 2013. And I just got really interested in, lifting heavy barbells. Before that, it was like training for aesthetics, and that just kind of got dry pretty quickly for me. And I enjoyed the heavy lifts a lot more than I enjoyed doing curls and stuff. And because I was working at a commercial gym, there wasn't a lot of people doing heavy lifts in commercial gyms. So that's kind of like how I got my first few clients, was literally people on the gym floor watching me train and be like, oh, that's cool. Like, you're squatting 3-4 plates and you're deadlifting 4 or 5 plates. Like, I want to do that. Can you show me how to do that? And that's kind of how I got my first few clients. And like you said, it was exactly like you said, mostly Gen Pop with, a handful of powerlifters. And then you take the first guy to a comp, and then, you attract more people, you get more attention, and then your roster just grows. And then you can kind of like, push those Gen Pop people to the side. And when I transferred over to, powerlifting being my main gig, was actually just like a really lucky job opportunity. So there was a gym in Sydney called Lift Performance Center, which was started in 2013. And the powerlifting coach at the time was John Tran, who is now, my boss at City Strength and owns City Strength HQ. So he was heading up powerlifting there. I actually did my second competition there. He hosted it. And then he moved on to open City Strength HQ, and there was a vacancy for the powerlifting coaching job. And I was already training there, so I kind of knew the owner, and I knew the people. It was a pretty small community. And I got called in and offered that job. And that was for me like the turning point from going from just being a regular PT who was trying to do powerlifting on the side to then like taking that big step into making that my focus. And I think at the time, like, I don't know how many coaches there were in Australia or Sydney who had over 50% of their roster being powerlifters. It's probably like only, a dozen?
Yeah, very few.
And now it's obviously more prominent with the sport growing. There's just a lot more athletes out there for people to be coached. So there's a lot more coaches who have, full-time rosters. But back then it was just such a, it was such a small community, small sport that it was, just really hard to survive and live if you only coach powerlifters, because there just weren't enough of them.
Yeah, like just wasn't a big enough of a pool of, I guess, like potential clients, I suppose. What was your coaching experience like before powerlifting? Like, were you coaching other sports? I can't remember. Or were you, because I know you're involved in basketball. Were you actually coaching basketball?
Yeah. So I've actually never worked in a job outside of sport. Every job that I've done in my whole life has been in sport. I started coaching basketball when I was in high school. In my last year of school, everyone in, your final year of school, you have to do like a volunteer role. You have to do like a certain number of hours as a volunteer to like, get a tick in a box or whatever. And the head of basketball came to me and I was a basketball captain in year 12, and she came to me and said, do you want to just coach the 13As as your volunteer role? I was like, yeah, like that sounds great. So, I would go and train them, and then I would coach them at their games, and then I would play my game after, and they would hang around and watch. And so that was like my first coaching gig. That's back in 2009. So like 16 years ago. And then when I left school, I continued coaching that same group of kids up until they were in 16s. I also coached a bit of rugby as well. And then when I got my certs, I actually coached S&C at a high school in Sydney, not the one that I went to, but a different one who had like a crazy strength and conditioning program. And I was in charge of junior basketball S&C, which was like, for me at the time, love lifting weights, absolutely love basketball. That was like a dream. It was like a dream.
Like the perfect crossover.
Working with kids to get them bigger, stronger, faster for basketball. But I quickly left that just because the hours weren't enough. It was just like a couple of morning sessions here or there, and it was getting in the way of, peak PT times when you're coaching Gen Pop, you're coaching them before work. And that's when I was at this school doing S&C. So I quickly left that. And, so I've been coaching for long time, over 15 years.
Do you think that gave you a bit of a leg up, like having that experience? Because like a lot of people will get into powerlifting coaching without that experience, without, coaching kids and running around in circles and yelling and, trying to coach like a group of 12 kids, and one of them's a superstar and the other one is like, very, very incompetent. And like, are those experiences relevant? Or do you think, well, coaching powerlifting is just so different, it's so disconnected that it's actually not that important?
I don't think the skills that you learn are that closely transferable, but I think the communication stuff that you learn and the like relating to people and how to talk to certain people versus other people, that stuff I think is really, really transferable no matter sort of what area you're coaching in. I actually found that the coaching of Gen Pop, and this is something that I would recommend for any new coach starting out, is that coaching Gen Pop is one of the best things that you can do, because you're going to see people who move in so many different ways that you're going to be able to problem solve for technique fixes, and you're going to be able to problem solve for a whole bunch of lifestyle factors that are going to come in handy when you do coach powerlifters. That I think I learned more from coaching Gen Pop, just coaching, you know, mums in their 40s and 50s, or dads, CEO dads or whatever. I think I learned more about coaching and coaching movement and relating to people and communication and stuff doing that than I did coaching teenage boys.
That's such good advice, and it actually leads me to my next kind of question, I suppose. You mentioned earlier that in the glory days and the early days, you know, you're learning a lot online. You know, you mentioned Eric Helms, previous colleague of ours, or current colleague, I suppose, Jamie Smith, has referred to it sometimes as like a YouTube degree, or a degree of YouTube or something like this, where, you know, a lot of your learnings, or a lot of our learnings, you know, because I came up in the same generation, happen online, and it still does. Obviously, a lot of people still are learning a lot online, but you're kind of talking also now about learning on the fly and like learning in person. How have things kind of changed in that sense? Like, are people learning about powerlifting in a different way now?
Totally, but I still think a lot of it is online. You'll just see some prominent coaches will have like a mentorship service. Like, you know, Jamie, he's got his mentorship, his coaching courses and stuff like that people can do. That stuff wasn't really around when we were coming up, JP. It was like the occasional seminar. You might be like, oh, Mike Israel and Chad Wesley Smith are coming to Sydney. And if you miss it for the weekend, you don't get the information at all. It's not recorded. It doesn't go on the internet. It's just gone. So for us, it was probably harder to find the information. You'd have to really go looking for it. But there was so much good information out there back then if you knew where to look. Whereas I think now it's a lot more saturated. It's probably a lot of this sort of people saying the same things, and, you know, like trying to get their minute in the sunlight by trying to have a controversial opinion so that they get views and they go viral on Instagram or whatever. And that didn't really exist back in the day. So yeah, I think like for me, I think I learnt probably the most from the YouTube stuff than the I guess YouTube degree that Jamie was saying, and then also from actually just being coached from the start. Like I was reflecting on this the other day. I have had a coach for every single week of my training life from May of 2014.
Whoa,
I know, how crazy is that?
That's actually a huge stat.
Yeah, so like, you know, over 11 years I have been coached, and I think, you know, when you have an analytical brain and you try to think about what's written in front of you and you ask the right questions, you can really learn a lot about what's happening, and you can try to, like, you know, reverse engineer and do those kind of things to figure that stuff out for other people as well, which I think that's been one of the, probably where I learnt the most was being coached.
You're like having a direct mentor the whole time. What's like the number one thing that stands out to you when you reflect on the fact that you've had a coach for 11 years? Like what does that tell you about yourself? You know, like if you've met someone else and you found out that they've been getting coached every week of their training career for the last 11 years, what's like the first inference you can make about someone when you hear that kind of information?
Actually, not too sure. What would you think?
The first thing I thought of when you said that was like that you value coaching, like that you obviously think coaching is important, like that, you know, like you're putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak, you know, like you're a coach yourself, but you truly believe in the coaching process, TM, that you've sought out coaches, and you've had various coaches in that time, you know, maybe 4, including myself. Yeah, you clearly value it. You think it's important.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I really like the idea of collaborating with the coaches, especially once I was probably working with you and I was more established myself as a coach. Because I started with you at the start of 2018. And I was at that point more established as a coach and probably felt that my voice was enough to be heard at that point, and that I actually wanted to have a bit of a part in deciding at least roughly what we do. Yeah, I love the back and forth. I love learning like in a one-on-one setting as well. I think like that for me works a lot better than learning in a group seminar or something like that. I think I actually like having one-on-one conversations with people and picking their brains. And, that comes back to another point that I put in your questionnaire, JP, which was like, I learned so much doing the Weekly Weights podcast with Will back in the day, because we were talking to like experts and the best athletes and the best coaches, and we were talking to them about like essentially their field of interest, and we were picking their brains for an hour or two. And you learn so much in that setting. You're just having a conversation with someone who just knows so much, and you're like a sponge just gathering all that information. But the other thing that podcast did was it forced Will and I to like reconcile our ideas and actually think about why we do certain things, and then go and say it to an audience of a couple thousand every week. So there's like a lot of pressure on like, fuck, do I actually have the right answer for this programming decision that I've made? Like, I need to actually have justification for it. And it made us reflect on what we were doing in all respects of coaching, which I think helped both of us just improve.
When were you running Weekly Weights, just for context again, just for the, for people following along with your career?
I think we started 2017, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it ran all the way up till Will left the industry, so 2021. So I think we actually did do an episode weekly for about a year and a half, and then it kind of was a bit less frequent after that.
Became less weekly, more
less weekly, fortnightly weights. I think we did like over 150 episodes.
That's a freaking good run, man.
Yeah.
That's actually such a good run, and yeah, it's such a good resource. And for those that maybe haven't listened to it, new kids on the block, go and look it up, because it's still online, right? Like Weekly Weights,
it's on Spotify.
Alex not strong. Weekly Weights.
Because
you're right, there's heaps of resources there. There's like such good conversations. Like, you interviewed some really really high up experts, and I think it was actually a real source of learning for a lot of powerlifters, like in that era, especially young coaches, young powerlifters. So talk us through. So in 2016, I want to go back to your career a little bit and kind of where you are now, because the thing I find really interesting about your career as a coach is that it's been like from my point of view, like a slow burn and work your way up to the top kind of thing. Like I said at the start, I consider you one of the top coaches in Australia right now. You've got one of the strongest rosters. You've got lifters going to worlds and nationals, and you guys won team champs, obviously. And that didn't happen overnight, whereas a lot of coaches, even myself, I put myself in that category, kind of like shot up to the top quite quickly, like, earned a lot of respect quite quickly. Whereas you never had like a viral moment, you never had like a one thing that like made everyone look at Alex Hayes. Whereas now you have this like really, really strong reputation, really strong general respect from the powerlifting community, both in Australia and outside, tested and untested. And that's kind of happened, because of this really, really consistent effort over the years. And so from 2016, you became full-time coach at Lift Performance Center. And then how did things kind of progress to now? Like in some sense, it feels like sudden. I'm like, whoa, shit, like Alex is such a freaking good coach. I mean, you've always been a good coach, but how did the development happen? Like, what were you doing things actively? Like, you obviously talked about Weekly Weights. What was the progression like in your career?
I honestly think it just comes down to, like, what's the Malcolm Gladwell thing, the 10,000 hours to become an expert? It honestly just comes down to that. I think a lot of people these days will go online full-time too early and not sort of spend the time in the trenches on the gym floor, watching people lift and watching dozens of people every single day, hundreds of reps every single day, and just getting that under their belt. Because I think that's really the most important thing is, like, if you work with enough people for a long enough time, you just learn just an immense amount of information that you can't learn in an online seminar. You can't learn on an Instagram post. You can't learn through YouTube TV or whatever. You can't learn through YouTube degree. So I really do just think it comes down to, like, I committed myself to trying to do this. And at first, like, I was a nobody, a no name. I was not like a great athlete. I was going to nationals and stuff. I never won a nationals. I never had anyone win nationals until, reasonably recently. But I did a good job with the people that I had. And then eventually they made it to nationals. And then eventually they got on the podium at nationals. And then eventually other lifters started to see that I was getting results with people of all shapes and sizes, both genders, all ages, and that's when people start to think, oh, maybe he could help me too. And then it just grows from there, and it really does happen organically. I don't think that there's been any particular moment where things have like boomed. I think it just really has been, like you said, a slow burn from just doing my best to learn and soak in information and slowly alter the way that I do things to match what I'm learning and what I'm seeing. And yeah, I think good things happen to people who work hard and do it for a long time and kind of refuse to quit.
And I feel like you're a living testament to that. In the trenches, how many hours do you reckon you've accumulated coaching people in real life, face to face, flesh to flesh?
Fuck. Thousands. Literally thousands.
Like, how many hours a week would you say on average over the last 12 years?
On
Some
average,
weeks more, some weeks less, obviously.
Probably on average 20 hours a week in person, I would say, on average, for 10 years. 52 weeks, 20, that's what, 1,000 hours a year? 10,000 hours?
There it is, baby, 10,000 hours.
There it is.
And you said, you think some people might get into things like full-time too early. I have to totally agree with you, and I'm obviously quite biased.
Not full-time, online full-time.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the name of this podcast is Practical Powerlifting, and you're one of the first guests because, well, obviously we're close friends. I respect you a lot, but also because I respect your work, and like you've accumulated those hours. And I think jumping straight to online coaching, you do miss a lot. You don't learn things that you just pick up in person, like you said, the way people move. But like you referenced communication earlier, like the way people communicate. Like one thing that I often speak to our team about is you can read people from, I want to say, before they even walked into the gym, because you can see them down the driveway. You can see their body language. You can see when you know people that well. When I often say I see people more often than they see their own partners sometimes. Like they're in the gym 4 days a week. I'm spending 6 hours with you a week, 8 hours with you a week. That's more than you spend with your own parents, than with your own partner, than with your own dog, than with a lot of people in your life. So you very quickly learn how to read people, but you don't get those skills online. Like, do you need those skills online? I don't know. That's another question, but there's just some huge value to like all those hours, thousands of reps, thousands of, hello, how you going today? How's your weekend? And then straight away you get this like sixth sense of like, something's up, man. Yeah. Something's freaking
okay?
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a special skill that you can't learn in a seminar, like you said.
Totally. Yeah, and I think online you learn to navigate those sort of, finding out those things about people online as well. It's just different. Like the way someone will check in, maybe they usually send like a really long description of how their training went, and then all of a sudden it's like, hi, here's my training. And you're like, okay, something's a bit off here. And then you have to poke and prod and find out a little bit more. So I don't think that there's necessarily, I just think you learn so much, particularly about movement and particularly about like how to talk to people. And one thing that I find really, really true is that the coaches who work with people in person often are the best game day coaches, because so much of game day is managing emotions and saying the right things at the right time to get someone to execute. And if all you do is sit behind a computer and give feedback, typing, or, maybe it's video feedback, you're not actually having these conversations with people and getting a response from them. It's delayed. Whereas like when you say something to someone, you can see immediately on their face whether what you've said has had a positive or negative or neutral impact. You don't get that online. And I think you can really like fine tune your communication skills with more practice in that regard. And I think that's like super, super underrated.
For sure. I mean, you mentioned game day coaching. That's one of the topics that I really want to dive into with you, but I do want to postpone it because it's like, as you talk, I just have all these ideas that come to me, and I want to make sure we give enough merit and time and credit to every point, because there's just like so much to cover. So before we get into game day coaching, which is going to be a long conversation, we're talking about a bit about education, developing your skills, practical knowledge through practical experience, theoretical knowledge through like, online stuff and seminars. How would you describe your theoretical knowledge? Like, how would you describe your like actual theoretical understanding, especially compared to, a lot of the peers and people around you as we're coming up?
I think I have quite a few holes actually in theoretical knowledge, and a lot of it comes back to like real base level like biology and stuff like that. Like a lot of that stuff I don't really know a ton about. But the programming aspects, the technique aspects, the biomechanics, stuff like that, I think I have quite a good knowledge. I did actually do sports science at uni for a year and a half, so I have studied a few of those topics, which have been useful in my coaching. How would I describe my theoretical knowledge? I guess pretty good, because I've just been around and seen so much. But I really do think that the theoretical stuff is exactly that. It's theoretical. I think if you have enough tools in your toolbox and you kind of have learnt enough from a wider variety of places, you have answers for more questions. And I think that's probably more of a benefit, is that, you know, you've got the experience, you've seen what works for multiple different people, and now you've got more sort of options at your disposal, of things to change, things to tinker with. The theoretical stuff is, yeah, like I said, it's theoretical. I think the practical application is really where it's at, and that comes from just being in the trenches, really practical experience, and having your hands on and having your fingers on the pulse and watching closely and watching what's going on, and, you know, looking for the right things.
Yeah, it's like one thing that I'm really big on is developing an intuition, like developing like a subconscious understanding of what's going on. You made a reference, or you commented before about, you know, you'll say something to someone and you can tell by the look on their face if it's had a positive, negative, or neutral impact on their being. You can't theorize that, you know. Maybe there is theoretical understandings about that, but, you know, a good coach like yourself can see it. And how do you learn that? It's only through experience. And that's like literally one of the reasons why I want to have these discussions with really successful, experienced coaches, is because I think, like, this is like a personal opinion, I'd be curious to hear what you say, that over the last few years, maybe 5, even 10 years or so, there has been a gradual increase in what I call spreadsheet coaches, like coaches that just like try to turn a human being into a formula or into a machine where they input numbers and numbers get spat out. And I don't think there's anything, not that I don't think there's anything, but I think there's a lot of merit. I do think there's a lot of merit in trying to measure and track and understand, you know, how a person responds to training. But the vast majority of people that we work with aren't robots. They don't respond in very predictable ways. You give someone a certain program now, they improve 50 kilos on the total. You repeat the program, they get injured. Like, it can be such varied responses. And I think this type of like practical experience that, you know, you and I are talking about, there's hours in the trenches working with Gen Pop people, that's like almost on the other end of the continuum of what I call spreadsheet coaches.
Yeah. Completely. And I often see coaches trying to, you know, track metrics and, you know, use these metrics as guides of progress, but I've never really been into that. And I think you probably just hit the nail on the head for why. Because I can see with my eyes if good things are happening. You can just tell. Like, you can watch someone lift and you can just tell if what you've done is working. Like, you don't have to have all of these metrics in the background. Oh, this person did 8,500 kilos of squat volume for the block. You know, like, we don't really need to know that kind of stuff. I think that confuses a lot of the really important things, and it makes us focus too much on those specific details and less about like the totality of what's going on. Because there's a whole bunch of things that aren't taken into account with stuff like that. You know, total tonnage doesn't indicate what rep range you're working in. It doesn't indicate what load range you're using. It doesn't indicate quality of movement. It doesn't indicate aches and pains and all these other things. It doesn't indicate like whether someone's actually enjoying the process. There's a whole bunch of things that just go so much further than ones and zeros on a spreadsheet. And I think like when you have that experience, you can kind of just see whether it's working or not. You don't have to have that number or that E1RM or that whatever telling you that it is. In
your coaching practice now, how much tracking do you do? Like, what things or what variables do you try to keep tabs on? Is there something that you're actually using, or is it mainly based off like, I guess, intuition and feel? Yeah, like talk us through what's actually important to you.
So what I do now is I actually try to keep things reasonably consistent from block to block. And the reason for that is I don't like to change too many things all at once, because I want to see if what I'm doing is working. And then really what I'm doing is I'm getting subjective feedback from the lifter. How are you feeling? How's your body feeling?
Hmm.
Are you enjoying yourself? The couple of things that I mentioned earlier. But then how is your performance on your top sets, on your main days? Like that's the kind of thing that we're looking at the most. That's the most important thing in powerlifting, really, for a competitor. There might be lifters I coach who aren't competitors or they're very new and they'll follow something completely different because they have just more general training will work better for them. But yeah, I try to keep blocks reasonably similar because when we get to the end of the block, we almost have like a chance to test whether it's worked. Does your top set move better than last week? Is there more weight on the last block? Sorry, is there more weight on the bar than last block? How is the movement quality compared to last block? These kind of things that we spoke about a bit earlier. That's enough of an indication for me that things are working. And I actually don't track tonnage. I don't track like average RPE. I don't track peak RPE. I don't track a lot of those things. What I do track and keep consistent is total number of working sets for main lifts. That's probably the main thing because I think that's actually the most important proxy for strength gain. Is are we doing enough hard sets? Are we doing enough maybe not hard, maybe hard sets is the wrong word, maybe productive sets? Are we doing enough productive sets to move the needle? That's the thing that I'm looking at most.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like a very like simplified approach. Do you think like there'll be some critics of that kind of approach that says that's too simplistic, that it's like, you're leaving like information on the table and you're like ignoring like data that's staring at you in the face. Like, what do you say to that kind of, people that might think like that?
I've tried doing all the tracking of the variables, and for me and for my personality, like the way that I actually really like numbers and I like delving into the weeds, I actually found that I got lost in it a little bit,
Hmm.
and I became too obsessed with kind of moving the needle and trying to increase things over time and trying to like force adaptations because of those numbers. Whereas more recently, I've come to terms with the idea that if something is working, just milk it, do it as long as you can. If 4 sets per week on squats is working, we don't need to do 6. We can just do 4, and then now 4's not working anymore. Let's do 5. I think that's a lot more of a and you said simple. I think coaching is quite simple, and I think the more simple that we can make it, the less noise in the system, the less things that we have to potentially change or not change. If we track every variable, which one do we change? There's too many. Like we don't know which one is responsible for what. Um, yeah, so I certainly got lost a little bit in the noise of it, and I got a little bit too like I don't even know what the word is, like just really really immersed in the numbers, and it took away from a lot of the more subjective stuff and a lot of stuff that I'm seeing with my eyes.
Yeah, I like what you said. That's such a great response. Like, you've tried it. I think that's like the key thing is like, you've tried doing that and it didn't work. Not that it didn't work, but use the words for me and my personality. And I think that's such an important um, perspective. For me and my personality, it didn't jive and it didn't work out. And an anecdote that I want to share with yourself and with listeners is, or it's like a saying that I say. I don't know. I invented it, so you can quote me if you want. Which is, um, the recipe well is the recipe that you'll cook best. And so, like, if you think of like a chef that, let's say an amateur or a home chef, you know how to make a good cake, for example, and you've got this cake down to a T. It's your favorite thing to make. If you get invited to a dinner party, this is the cake you're going to bring. And then Gordon Ramsay himself, right, sends you a recipe and says, no, this is how to make your cake even better. The first time you try to do that, the first time you try to make that cake with using a different recipe, you're going to botch it. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to be a bad result. And you would have been better off just using the recipe that you know well, the one that you can do like the back of your hand, the one where if you accidentally put too much sugar in, you know how to like compensate for it elsewhere. Where if you accidentally leave the oven 20 degrees colder than you should have, you know how to fix it later because it's the one that you've made 100 times. And I think there is such a underrated concept here of like, you as the chef, you need to know how to cook, and your systems and your recipes and your programs that you've run numerous times, that you've tested and trialed, and you've got this sixth sense of like when a lifter is not responding well, it's like, well, you've run this similar system dozens of times, if not hundreds of times, at hundreds of points in different lifters' careers, that you'll have like this subtle understanding of like how to pull the dial or how to push someone, or you're 3 weeks out and someone's like failing a single that they should have been getting, and it's like, well, you know how to manage that because you've done this system before. Whereas if you try to do things that are new to you, that are totally foreign concepts, they might work well for other coaches, but if it doesn't work for you and your personality, I think that's like such an important consideration.
Yeah, totally. And this was something that I really tried to wrap my head around emerging strategies. Like I really tried to wrap my head around it. I tried it with a few people. I gave it like a really, really good crack. And there were just things in the system that I couldn't figure out. And I felt like I was actually doing my athlete a disservice for running them through something that wasn't really suited to me because I didn't have that experience and that knowledge of the system. And I felt like they were almost like spinning their wheels because I was trying to like experiment on them and figure it out on the fly, when I had my own recipe, like you said, just sitting there that I wasn't using. So yeah, I think that's so important. Every coach is going to have their system, their style, and I think it's actually really good for coaches to lean into that because you know it best and you know how to adjust when, like you said, if 3 weeks out single they failed, you know potentially why, you know what variables to adjust now, you know what questions to ask them, and you can sort of mend fences on the fly, I guess.
I mean, that's half of coaching, mending fences on the fly. I think another part of your personality that suits this style of coaching that you're talking about is that you're just so good with numbers. You're so good, you're like almost like a Rain Man of powerlifting. You know all your lifters really, really well. You know all their PBs off the back of your hand. You don't, like, I think a lot of coaches who rely heavily on like data and numbers and spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff, which again isn't bad in of itself. I think it's because they don't have this like innate ability to just like track it all in, like you've got like a supercomputer in the back of your head where you're able to track it all anyway. And so you have like, that's what gives you the intuition because, like I said, a lifter will fail or something will go wrong or something will go really well. And that gets banked in this like subconscious understanding of like what's going on rather than trying to like logic your way through. Yeah, like I think you just like have that.
That's funny that you said that because I totally agree. I've never actually thought about it like that, but that is probably the biggest reason. It's like I already got the numbers in my head, like they're already there, they already make sense. Now I can just focus on the what I'm seeing, the output.
Yeah, it's like your pattern recognition is just so high now because again, 10,000 hours. How many comps have you been to? God knows. Like I wish, like one thing I often say is I wish I knew how many squats I've seen. Like how many actual reps have I watched of a squat, whether it's in comp, on the video, online, on, wherever it is, whatever context, how many actual up and downs have I watched with my eyes? Because it'd be in the millions.
It'd be millions, man, millions.
And when you've seen that many, you just know what's wrong, if it's high or not. Like, for example, I don't know if you would agree with this. This is a little bit off topic, but like, I feel like I can tell if a squat's high or not, even if the angle is bad. Like I can be standing, spotting someone, like right there, and I can tell it was high or not, or at least have a really good sense if it was high or deep, because you know what it should look like, you know where the rhythm should be, and especially if it's someone you've seen squat before, like, you don't have to have the knee height angle because you just know, there's a subconscious feeling there, I guess.
Yeah, I find myself getting more and more confused with squat depth the more that I watch like IPF Worlds and stuff. So to be honest, now I'm like, actually, was that depth? I don't know. Was it depth? Not sure.
Yeah, nobody knows. Yeah, that's actually probably a more pertinent point. Speaking about watching IPF Worlds, and let's go towards game day coaching, which you kind of referred to as before, which I know is like one of your big passion points. And I think one of the reasons why I think that you are so passionate about game day coaching is because it's the most sporty element of powerlifting. And you're obviously a big sports fan, and powerlifting for a lot of people is like, like powerlifting for a lot of people is a thing that they can measure and track and improve on.
It's like a hobby for most people, right?
Like, what's that?
It's like a hobby for most people, right?
Yeah, like it is, and it is a hobby. And I think even for a local competitor, it can still be competitive. But game days where the actual like, okay, 1-on-1 or 3-on-3, it's not 3-on-3, but 1-on-1 or 1-on-1 can kind of happen. Um, Unlike a lot of other powerlifting aspects, you talked about biomechanics and physiology and even psychology, a lot of that you can learn online. You can learn reading books and articles and courses. There is far less resources when it comes to theoretically learning about game day coaching. And I think it's one of the few aspects that is purely learn by experience, get thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I love game day the most, outside of the competitive element, like I love competition in any respect. Like if you were like, bro, we're gonna have a heads or tails competition, are you in? I'd be like, fucking oath, I'm gonna beat you. Like that would be my first thought. So like I love that sporty competitive. If there's something to be won, I'd like to win it. Like I love that. But I also think that as a coach, game day is the day where you can have the biggest influence over someone's result or outcome over any other time in their training.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can make or break someone's day, with good or bad game day coaching, with decision making, with way you talk to someone, the way that you see body language and then respond, to any other time in coaching. Like there's not a training block, there's not a one-on-one PT session, there's nothing that matches the impact that you can have in one day than competition day itself. And that is why I love it the most, because I think if you do a really good job, you can just make someone have such a fucking great experience that they want to come back and do it again. Or maybe they win a medal, or they win a national championship or something. And that's something that you can't take away from someone. And I just like love that aspect. As far as learning about it, I was so clueless my first few times, like so clueless. And I hated how I felt when I made a mistake. And I still hate how I feel when I make mistakes. Still make heaps of mistakes. I felt so shitty about making mistakes for my clients, making the wrong decision, that it like forced me to want to be better and learn and improve. I'm curious for you, JP, how did you learn about game day coaching? Because you and I have very similar thinking when it comes to game day coaching, attempt selection, stuff like that. Who did you learn from, and where did you get your skill set from? Because I actually learned a lot from you. Like when we were in Uzbekistan, you and I had a few sessions where we coached together, and I was trying to pick your brain and figure out why you were making certain decisions, and I was getting you to explain what the options that we had and why we'd pick one versus the other, or we wait until we do this, or we wait until we do this, and we've got lot number here and blah blah blah. Where did you learn from?
I mean, a lot of my learnings, I have to admit, did come from Wilks. Like Robert Wilks was probably like my first mentor when it came to comps. Another name that's important is Joel Ridings, who a lot of people wouldn't know him, but he was from Mildura. And the thing that I learned from them, the thing I learned most from them too, was how important it was to have a very, very good understanding of one, the rules, like literally the rules of in the rule book, because that way you can exploit them and you know what's going on. And the second part, which is closely related to the rules, is the logistics of a comp, like timings, when things happen, how things are supposed to go, when mistakes happen logistically, because they happen all the time, how to like exploit those things. So for example, like a great example of this was I had a lifter in a comp who wasn't ready. Like bar was loaded, or bar was almost about to be loaded, but was not ready. Did not have their stuff on them. Didn't have their wrist wraps. They were just behind. And literally a second before they called bar loaded, I called to the chief referee and was like, "Hey, can we just wipe the bench down before my lifter comes out?" And they go, "Okay, yeah, sure." And then they get the spotter to wipe the bench down, and that chewed up 20 seconds. And that 20 seconds was just enough time to have my lifter ready to, with their wrist wraps, standing at the edge of the platform, ready to walk out. And we didn't need the bench to be wiped. But I know that I'm allowed to do that. And I know that maybe if I didn't do that and my lifter walked out with only 30 seconds left, they're panicked. They get told to re-rack the bar because their elbows aren't straight. Suddenly they've got 5 seconds left and they miss their opener and it's just a big disaster, right? So if you know all the rules and like, that's not even bending the rules. It's just like, okay, well, if I'm allowed to ask for them to wipe the bench down, I'm just going to ask them to wipe the bench down or whatever it might be. So a lot of it was like learning about the rules and logistics. And The other thing that I was very unique to my learning experience was I went to 4 consecutive worlds in a row and 4 Oceanias in a row, like 4 years in a row. And so for a 4 year window, I went to like Oceania's Nationals, Worlds, Oceania's Nationals, Worlds, Oceania's Nationals, Worlds, like back to back to back every year, 3 of these in a row. And when you're just surrounded by that many lifters and coaches doing all the right things and making lots of mistakes as well, you just like learn so much from, yeah, I like a week at Worlds was like for me what I'd call an intensive. It's like every day elite lifters going on the platform, elite coaches doing their thing. It's like you just can't not learn in those contexts. So I was very lucky in that sense.
Yeah, and I think like you and I have had the very rare occasion where we're not busy at a comp doing something, where we've sat in the crowd and like we chat about every attempt selection. Oh, we think they should have done this. Oh, we think they should have done that. Oh, wonder what they'll do in their last one. And I think that's something that I will always implore new coaches to do, is to pretend like you're the coach of every athlete in a session and watch. Sorry, that was so loud. Pretend like you're the coach of every single athlete in a session that you're watching at Worlds, and tell me what you would do. And like maybe even write it down and go like, okay, this lifter opened at 145 kilos and it was a bit slow and they got one red light for depth. What would be your attempt selection? Would you do 150? Would you do 152.5? Like what would you do? And like think about all of those decisions. And I think that's a really, really fast way to learn, and to learn what you would do when you get put in a similar situation. Because when you're coaching in a platform, like actually I had a comp over the weekend, and one of my lifters, her best deadlift is 150, and her opener was 130, and she went out for 130 and it didn't break the floor. And we were both like looking at each other like, what the hell just happened? And I knew that like she just kind of like didn't really take it that seriously and was a bit nonchalant. And she came off and she ran off and she was like, and I was like, okay, just like, I'm just going to put in 135. And we went up anyway. She didn't even break the floor. We went up anyway because I know her well enough. And sorry, the point of this story was you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. So if you watch a powerlifting competition, you're going to see more scenarios, and it's going to kind of get you prepared for those scenarios happening to your lifter and then you having to make a decision. She ended up making 135 and then making 145. So yeah, I think that's something that I would implore all new coaches to do, is go to a powerlifting comp or even just watch a stream and pretend like you're every single lifter's coach and you're making every decision for everyone. Because that gives you a chance to make like 100 decisions in a couple hours, which you can learn from. And you can go like, I would have done 180 here, and then they go and attempt 177.5 and they miss, and you're like, okay, well I was wrong.
I was going to say, firstly, if a lifter misses an opener and you go up 5 kilos, do not try this at home, kids. We are working professionals. We have trained professionals here to oversee these attempt selections. No, I love that advice, and this is going to sound super freaking nerdy, but I used to do this all the time. I'd watch Worlds. I'd literally have pen and paper because I'm old school like you, and I would watch all the openers on lifts, and then I would say what weight I was going to choose on the next one. And, keep in mind that these are good lifters with good coaches, with good ideas, good plans. And like you said, like a lifter opens at 180 and I say, okay, I'm going to do 192.5 next. But the coach actually goes straight to 200. That's like really different to my idea, right? Like if you're off by 2 kilos, sure. Okay, you're off by 7. I'm like, oh, that's surprising. But what's the outcome? Was I right? Was I wrong? Like you said before, I would have gone up 10. They only went up 7 and they missed. Okay, I was really wrong.
Yeah.
Why was I wrong? Go back and watch the second attempt. Oh, okay. So that doesn't have 10 kilos in reserve. I thought it had 10 in reserve. It didn't even have 7. So, okay, I've got to reprogram, recalibrate like what I think is good, how much is left in any lift. So like you said, you get hundreds and hundreds of decisions in watching other people. Whereas if you're only coaching 2 lifters in a comp, you've only got, 18 decisions. Well, not even, because openers already decided, I guess. Does that count as a decision? I don't know. But yeah, it's just very much experience based, right? And then the other aspect of it all is the intangibles. You talked before about communication. Communication is like such an important part of your coaching philosophy. What's communication like, and how does it differ on game day than in a training session? Like let's say you're coaching someone in the gym, it's Monday, week 3 of a block, they're doing squats. How does that differ to the communication maybe on game day?
I think you want to kind of keep it really, really simple. You don't want to take time away from the lifter to take time away and space away from them on their day. You want to keep it as simple as possible. So I think just knowing knowing what you would decide before you've even spoken to them, and then get a gauge on how they're feeling relative to that, and then make the decision. This is a rule that I have with deciding third attempts. And I'll see if you like this or not. So when a lifter does their second attempt, I will in my head immediately be like, okay, this is what I think they should do for their third attempt. And let's just say it's 250 kilos. Let's say that's what I want to put their third attempt in at. Their second attempt was 237.5. I want to put their third attempt in at 250. They come off the platform and I will be like, what do you think you have? And if they say a number that is lower than my number, I will give them their number. If they say a lifter that is equal to or higher than my number, I'll give them my number. Because my number is like, that is sort of as much as I'm willing to go. That's what I'm confident in. If you say something below that, that means that you're a little less confident than I am. And that kind of maybe, means that you're not quite like firing, or you don't feel like you're quite firing. But even though I think it looks like you're firing, there's that sort of underlying mental aspect of, approaching a lift. If you're not 100% confident, I'll give you your number.
I love that as a rule. I think I think the thing is, right, a rule like that is a great way to systemize attempt selection. And if you're a new coach out there listening to this, you've only got 5 lifters on your roster, you've only competed yourself a handful of times, and you've only got a handful of clients that have competed. A rule like that is a great starting point. But at the same time, as we've been talking about, over time, you develop intuition, you develop an ability to just like read things even better. And systems are good because they give you like rules that guide your decisions. But at some point, the decision becomes like a little bit more innate anyway. Like it just comes out as like, what's the right thing to do?
Yeah, and there are a lot of lifters who I won't
there are times you break
ask
that rule,
those
right?
questions. Well, it's not even that I break the rule. It's that I won't even ask for their input because I know them well enough now. Or I don't trust that they're going to say a number that's fucking way above what my number is. So like Charles Kafusi, I'm never going to ask him what he wants because he's always going to say like 15 kilos more than what I'm going to give him. So like, yeah, there's an aspect of sort of knowing your lifter well enough to know whether you can even ask that question or knowing what question to ask. Because sometimes you might be like, oh, how are you feeling today? How did that feel? Did that feel strong? Did that feel easy? Like, how much more did you have in the tank? Those are the questions you might ask. But for others, you might literally say, how much do you think you have?
Does it change? Like, does this rule change in a competitive setting? Like, let's say it's not just a local comp, but, it's a team champs or it's a nationals where there's more on the line, it's the second attempt deadlifts or third attempt deadlifts and it's tight. Like, do you still factor in those types of conversations? Or is it a case of, for the lifter, you do your thing and let me do my thing?
I think there's a lot of you do your thing, I'll do my thing. But I think there has to be a level of comfort that the athlete is taking going into the next lift. If you give them a sort of more aggressive attempt, I think it's best to check in that they're okay with it, like to check in that they're confident for it. And if it is a nationals or worlds or a higher level meet, generally if the lifter is confident, they are going to be fine. Like they will do it. So I think when it comes to like final deadlift attempts, that's when I would talk to the lifter and go, okay, here's some potential scenarios. A really good example is nationals last year. My client Kate Atia, she was in 4th place before the final deadlift attempt, and she was the last deadlifter. And everyone before her made theirs. So we had a choice at the end. Do we attempt 215 for the silver and to win on bodyweight, or do we attempt 218 to chip first place by half a kilo and win gold? And I was very confident for 215. I knew that 218 would be a stretch. So I asked her, do you want silver or gold? These are your 2 options. And she said, silver. And I said, sweet. And we loaded it and she got it. And it was the perfect call because she probably wouldn't have got the 218. Whereas if, you play that scenario to a new coach and you're like, oh, there's only 3 kilos difference between gold and silver here. Like you'd kind of be silly not to go for gold. But in that instance, it was actually the perfect call. I can send you the video after we've finished talking, and you'll see what I mean.
Maybe I can even overlay it in the
all-out grinder.
Maybe I can even overlay it if you send it to me.
Yeah. It was a like all-out grinder. It was like I think 17 and a half more than anyone else deadlifted in the session. So it was like a huge deadlift. And yeah, you would think like 3 kilos would be an easy choice to not take silver and go for gold instead. But yeah.
Can I give you some really strong praise about that story? And I think it's a very important message that lifters and coaches alike need to hear. And that it's the respect that you showed your lifter and their experience. I think a lot of coaches get a little bit, honestly, arrogant, or, they see it as their career, which it is, obviously. But at the same time, it's a lifter's journey. Like, it's their lifting career. It's their lifting experience. And it's not up to you to decide what's best for them. It's up to them to decide what's best for them. And, in a team-based sports, there are different contexts. Like, team champs is slightly different. But this is Kate's experience, right? Like, this is her personal lifting experience. And if she wants to do this weight because that's what she thinks she has and that's what she'd be happy with, it's not for you to decide, no, but gold's more important. It's up to her to decide. That's, I'd rather the silver give up gold because that's my limit and that's what I want, and I'll be very happy with that. You can't, I guess what I'm trying to say here is a lot of coaches would impose their goals on their lifters. That's probably the best way to put it. I want you to go to nationals because you've got the potential, and, but it's like, for example, I've got lifters in the gym right now who I'm like foaming at the mouth because they've got so much potential. They're just built for it. They're genetically predisposed to it. They've never touched a barbell in their life. Like, for example, I've got one person who I won't name who's going to do their first comp in a couple of weeks, and she'll squat 180 kilos, 175 kilos, no belt, no sleeves. Never. And when they joined the gym, had no experience with lifting weights at all. Never done it before. And so a conversation that I have to have with Josh and Jeremy and Billy is like, hey, like, let's not impose on her what we want out of them. Because, like, I know if she wants to go to nationals, she could be very competitive in the future, but maybe they don't want to. And that's not up to me to decide. That's up to you to decide. And, I've got to inform you and say, hey, you've got this potential, and like, it's up to you how much you want to invest in this. But in a similar way, like with your story with Kate, it's like, it's not up to you to say, hey man, like, this is what's good for you. It's up to them to decide what's good for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also going into the comp, her goal was to win. And it was right there. Like, it was literally right there. But it was the smart decision. It was the right decision. Because, like I said before, I don't think she had the 218. And yeah, this is something that I really learned early on, probably, close to 10 years ago, really, really early on. I had a really, really talented junior lifter who, was good enough to break national records, good enough to win junior nationals. And it's my belief that I kind of pushed her a little bit too far. And I imposed what I would have wanted in her situation onto her when that's actually not what she wanted. And I think it's part of what, actually drove her away from the sport a little bit. And it's a huge regret of mine. And it's something that I'll never do again because, it left such a sour taste in my mouth because it was so selfish. And also, I'm sure it left a sour taste in their mouth as well. Yeah. So I've definitely experienced that. And yeah, I'll never do that again.
No, thanks for sharing. That's obviously hard to admit that, you make mistakes. Obviously we all do. But yeah, it's not easy to admit that, yeah, you made like, such a mismanagement of, I guess, of someone's lifting career, because that's what we're doing. As a coach, you're basically managing someone's lifting career, helping them along their own journey. But it's very easy to get caught up in our own goals and our own experiences, right?
Yeah, like just because I wanted to at that point be a national champion doesn't mean that you do, or doesn't mean that you should. Mm-hmm. Everyone is doing this for their own reasons, like that, whether it's just to get stronger, whether it is to go to world championships, whatever it is. And I kind of like to have that conversation with lifters pretty early on. Like, what do you want out of this? What do you want out of this block? What do you want out of this next competition? And I'll take them for their word, and I'll push them if they tell me that they want to be pushed. And if they just tell me they want to be fun, I'll be a little bit more lax with, what I expect from them. I won't push them as hard at their training. I won't, give them a kick up the ass if they don't, deserve it. I think that's a huge part of the coaching process too. And that's a huge part of that communication piece that we were talking about earlier, is like, find out what this person actually wants, find out where they're at, and you need to meet them where they're at. You can't just try to put them on the same level as everybody else, because that's not what they want.
Yeah, like I asked you in the in the lead up to this conversation about what your philosophy is on navigating a lifter's mental game, and so that story you shared kind of like touched on that a little bit, right? I asked you about, is it the coach's responsibility to manage a lifter's mentality towards a sport, they're avoiding burnout, fluctuating motivation, or is that up to a lifter? And how do you protect an athlete's long-term health and relationship with the sport versus pushing them and trying to get the most out of them? Because on one hand, as a coach, it is our responsibility to get the most out of a lifter, right? To get the most results, to get the best performance from someone. But doing so comes at a cost, and that pressure and that stress can drive people away from the sport, like as you've experienced. And I mean, of course, I've experienced. I've made the same mistake with people before. And so there is this like balancing act of like, you don't want to be too soft. You don't want to be like, hey man, it's up to you. Like nothing really matters. If you're too like laissez-faire, you're not getting the most out of any lifter and they're not getting the best results. But if you push someone too hard, they might burn out. I guess, how do you balance that? How do you read that?
Yeah, I guess it really does come down to those early conversations. Sometimes someone will come to you and say, hey, like, I'm getting into powerlifting. Like, I think it's pretty cool to be strong. And they use quite soft language like that. And like, oh yeah, I'd like to maybe one day do a comp and, see how I go. That's not someone that you kick up the arse. That's not someone that you push and, force them to do all these things that take away from other parts of their lives, like you said. Because there are sacrifices. The higher that you want to go with this, the more things you have to sacrifice from your life to get there. And someone will talk to you like that, and they're telling you what they expect from you. They're telling you what they expect out of it. And then there's going to be people on the other side of the coin who come to you and go, hey man, this is the national qualifying total. This is the rankings. I want to get into those rankings. And I want to get into those rankings in the next 9 months. And you go, sweet, we've got some work to do. Let's go. And that tells you. It's up to them to tell you. And then it's up to you to hold them accountable to what they tell you. And I think that's the point, is that it's their decision, but it's your responsibility to hold them to their decision.
Yeah, I think also it's worthwhile to note that I think lifters don't even know what they want sometimes. Like they don't, especially even new, they don't know what's involved, and they also don't know what the cost is. They don't actually realize. Like someone like, and I'm sure you've had this experience. Someone comes to you and says, "I want to break this record," or "I want to go to nationals," and "I want to do this," and I've been forced into positions where I have to have a conversation and say, "Look, if you want to get to that level," and I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit to make a point, but if you want to get to that level, you're going to need to up your training from 3 to 5 days a week. You're going to need to discontinue playing social basketball on Saturdays because that's interfering. You're going to need to try to up your sleep somehow, which means you're probably going to have to sacrifice time with your partner or so and so and so, whatever it might be. You're going to need to really sort your diet out because that's letting you down, and that's going to take huge steps, or huge. It's going to have implications on your social life, for example. Look, I know you love going out to the footy with your mates on the weekend. You're going to have to find a way to stop that. Blah, 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 blah. That's going to come with these costs. The benefit is you're going to break that record one day, or whatever your goal is. Are you willing to do those things? Because if you're not willing to do those things, you don't have to go and get a nationals. You don't have to break those records. Like people kind of like, I find people come up with these goals, kind of pull them out of their ass. And I'm like, yeah, but do you know what it's going to take to get there? It doesn't come for free. It's not just tick the box and, okay, one day I'll break that record, or one day I'll make it to nationals, or one day I'll hit that QT. It's, especially as, the better you get, the more sacrifices you're going to have to make. You're going to have to make concessions in other parts of your life. And if you're not willing to make those concessions, that's fine. But you just have to know that that's there. Whereas I think sometimes people become a little bit deluded, like not knowing, they're just ignorant, like not ignorant in an derogative way, but in a literal way. You just don't actually know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think that comes from the idea of like comparison. It's like people get into powerlifting, they see someone who's at the top of their game. Maybe they see Nathan Tannis or, Josh Lenivier or someone at the top of their game, or, Natalie Lalai or whatever. And they go, I want to be strong like that person. And, you're comparing yourself to someone who's A, probably way more gifted than you are, B, probably way more committed than you are, and C, someone who's been doing this for 10 to 15 years already. So, like, unless you're willing to sacrifice things and commit to it, and then also do those things for a decade plus, you're probably not going to get there. And that's the reality of it. If someone is super pie in the sky with what they say, and then they're still going to the footy and having beers on the weekend, and they're still playing video games until 2 a.m. and getting 3 hours sleep, and they're still not sticking to their diet and not getting enough protein in, then you need to call them out on it, because you said, hey mate, you told me you wanted XYZ, and I told you that it was going to take ABC in order to get there, and you're not holding up your end of the bargain. Like, is this something that you actually really want? And you can have that conversation. Like, your actions aren't aligning with your words. And is it because you actually don't want that goal? Like, what is it? And then that's another conversation.
We've talked a lot about conversations, communication. Like you said earlier, communication is a big part of your coaching philosophy. We're talking about communication in game day, which I think is the most, not volatile, but it's the most sensitive types of conversations. Word choice is very important. Tone of voice is very important when you're having these conversations and these communications. I want to ask you a very practical question. Does your communication style, word choice, sense of humor, would you modify that consciously? Does it change based on the personality of the lifter? You got someone that's more introverted, someone that's more neurotic, someone that's more, more serious. Maybe you've got like a masters lifter who doesn't even know the first thing about the rules and is just like signing up because they want to. They thought it would be fun. Like, how does I'm sure it does. How do you do it? How do you modify your sense of humor? Because I know coaches, for example, and I've been guilty of it. I say I know coaches, I'm thinking to myself, where my personality comes out almost too easily.
Sarcastic.
Yeah, I can be ironic and sarcastic, and I've had to learn the hard way that doesn't jive with some people, and so I've got to filter that a little bit to be careful to say, hey, like those sarcastic comments when someone misses a third lift isn't helpful. John Paul, like that's not helpful. Don't do that. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I think, again, it comes down to learning about the person. I think that's the number one thing, is you have these conversations with the person over the course of coaching them for months and years. And those conversations will obviously change as you coach someone. You'll get used to what language you need to use for those people, and you'll get clues about certain things that they say and what that actually means, because people will tell you one thing, but they mean something else, and someone else will tell you the same thing and it actually means something different to that. So you have to learn that as well. So it really, I think, just comes down to learning about the person's psychology and personality, and then tapering your personality and communication style to each individual person on comp day. And I've kind of described myself before as a emotional chameleon on comp day, and like, having to, okay, now I'm with this person, I've got to match them, and I've got to match their intensity, I've got to match their energy, I've got to match their emotion, I've got to match their language, got to match the way they like to be communicated to, and then now I'm going to this person who's a bit more laid back, and now I can just be there and calm them and comfort them. And then now I've got to be to this person needs a bit more instruction, so now I've got to be more of a teacher. And then I've got to go to this person, now I've got to be a bit more of a motivator. And then you're kind of like changing your hats throughout the day to match the person and get the most out of the individual in front of you.
Yeah, I love that term, emotional chameleon. I don't think I've heard that before. And what it makes me think of is the challenge that all good coaches will experience when you're coaching multiple lifters in the same group, especially same session, especially same group or flight, especially when they follow each other or they're very close to following each other and they're very different. You got one lifter coming out for their second squat and they're snorting ammonia and they're getting fucking G'd, and all their friends are in the gym, all their friends from the gym are in the crowd screaming for them. They're walking the platform, they're throwing their arms up, asking for crowd support. And then the next lifter or two lifters after that is like that super chill, like doesn't respond well to that needs to not be over aroused. But because of the overflow of energy and because of the momentum and the inertia, the crowd keeps like cheering and jeering him up. And your assistant coach gets carried away and then wants to give him back slaps, and you just need to be like, whoa. This is not what this guy needs right now, or girl. We need to like
bring the energy down.
We need to adapt on the fly. We need to respect the individual. Again, like there are some coaches who just like, I think apply like a bit of a one size fits all. Like they're the backslap guy, or they're the chiller coach. And so they're chill with everyone. And it's like, no, man, you've got to actually be like you described, emotional chameleon. You've got to be able to wear different hats. And I think that's just as a skill. I think the first part of it is you need to know you need to do that. And then the hard part is like, yeah, practicing it and realizing the needs of each individual.
And I think the real skill is identifying what someone needs and then identifying what their behavior is in that moment and then getting them to the correct destination. Because you might see someone who likes to be sufficiently G'd up, but they're going a little bit overboard at one point. And you're like, no, you need to pull it down a little bit. Like we can't carry on this much. Or you might see someone who is being a little bit too lax and you're like, no, we need to get you up a little bit more. And I think that comes with, you don't get that right the first time, the first comp, probably not even the second comp. That's something that comes, third, fourth, fifth plus comps that you work with someone. You really get that right and you can really nail exactly what you need to do just before the lift to get them to the right place. But I think what you'll find is less is more, like definitely less is more. I used to be like with my lifter for like 2-3 minutes and like talking to them, and it's just too much. Like it's too overstimulating. Give them their own space, get them in their own head, and then chime in when you need to. Very, very quick economy of words. Couple pointers. Maybe you say one cue. Maybe you say nothing, and just really keep it very, very simple.
You've been to so many comps, so many nationals. You've seen so many lifters. Are there like certain patterns or mistakes that you see that other coaches are making that you just wish you could grab them by the shoulders and be like, dude? Or is there like a particular story that you remember or something that really stood out to you that was like, oh man, like they just really mucked that up there? Or maybe they nailed it and then someone did something really good and you're like, okay, that's actually really interesting. I didn't think of that.
Oh, nothing's coming to the top of my head. I do remember a nationals a long time ago, and I was actually with you in the crowd when this happened, when a coach put in a deadlift change like 5 seconds after bar was loaded, and they only needed an extra, I think 3 kilos, I think it was, for the win, because the prior lifter had made theirs, and they were still the last deadlifter, and they came out to a lift that was like 3 kilos less than what they needed for the win and came and got it. And that was, for me, heartbreaking. I was like, oh my God, how can you make that mistake? And I think that comes down to your original point of knowing the rules and knowing them inside out, like knowing when you're allowed to change, knowing, if you make a change, what implications that has on the rest of the order and the timing and all of those kind of things. So I think like I've actually been really, really impressed with the coaches in Australia over the last sort of 5 years. I actually think COVID forced a lot of coaches to do learning and to improve their crafts, whether it be decision making, whether it be programming, whether it be analyzing movement. And I think a lot of coaches actually leveled up during that period. And I also think that it forced a lot of coaches who were kind of on the fence. It forced them out because now they were like kind of out of a job. Mm-hmm. So I think we see, I think we see a lot less very obvious mistakes than we used to. Like when we were starting, it was a bit of a wild west. You could almost, like, if you knew the rules and you were a good coach, you would almost have a huge advantage on comp day. Whereas I think it's certainly evened out a lot over the last few years. Coaches know what they're doing. A lot more coaches have had the opportunity to go to internationals and coach and see stuff and see the best coaches and lifters do it and what they do and analyze their decisions. So I don't think there's anything really that jumps out to me recently as far as like something that people are getting wrong, because I actually think people are getting stuff really right now.
It's actually such a good perspective. Like the overall standard has just lifted and increased, and yeah, like you said, there's less people making mistakes. And in your formative years of coaching, you were in your early 20s, you were a junior, or so was I. We kind of came through that kind of wave. You're in a very different stage of your life now. You're a father of 2 and you're married. Has the changes in your stage of life changed your approach to coaching and the way that you actually kind of like connect with people that you're coaching with? Like, do you think that as you've matured, I'm not speaking in terms of like you getting better as a coach because you've learned more, but I'm just talking about you're in a different stage of your life now. Does that change the way that you actually, your philosophy or your approach to how you manage your clients and lifters?
I think just over time I've become more professional in the way that I do things. And I think that just comes with maturity. I think I'm at a really good age and place now where I've been around long enough that I have sort of the respect of older lifters, which I definitely didn't have when I was newer. Like when I was 22, someone who was 35 who'd been around, they're like, oh, fuck, who's this young kid? Like why would they respect me, right? Like I got no ill will against that. But I'm also not so old that I can't relate to juniors and younger kids as well. So I feel like I'm kind of in this good place now where I get respect from all age groups and genders and stuff like that now, which I'm really grateful for. I don't know how long it will last. I'll probably end up being too old in a few years to connect to all the juniors. But yeah, I feel like, I'm like a big brother to a lot of the juniors that I coach. Like that's how I feel. Like I'm kind of like a mentor, big brother to a lot of the younger kids I coach. And then, I get that respect of my masters lifters that I wouldn't have gotten 10 years ago. So I feel like, I'm in a good sort of like mid-range spot now.
Yeah, like you said, young enough to be cool, but old enough to to have the respect of the older people, of the masters lifters. I think there's also like a level of like empathy. I think that comes with it as you get a bit older. You get a bit more, like you said, you get a bit more mature. You meet different people. You have a bigger pool of clients that you've worked with. Like, over the years, you've accumulated more clients, and you start. At least it has been my experience that you start to realize, man, people have different like life situations, different perspectives. Like, I mean, for sure, like you're having kids, you're like, oh shit, this is actually so much harder for parents than I thought it was, maybe, or whatever it might be. Like, I just think like when you meet more and more people and more stories and more experiences, you realize, okay, this is actually a very different experience for different people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think when you experience so many different people coming from so many different walks of life, it allows you to meet them where they're at a bit better because you've seen it before, most likely. I've seen a kid in their 20s who's at uni, and I know what kind of free time he's got, and I know what kind of like drive he'll have. And then I've also seen, a mid-30s mum who's got two young kids, and what that means and what implications that has on her time and on her stress management and on her availability to train. And I've seen it before, so it gives me a bit of a sort of like leg up in, I guess, figuring out that initial teething period with a new client, because that's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. It comes back to like learning about someone, and when you sort of have all of these archetypes at your disposal, you can kind of start on first base in a way rather than starting on home plate, and you're kind of like you've got a little bit of a leg up, and you can kind of tinker from there as opposed to just being completely unaware of anything.
Yeah, like you just have this understanding, like you said, and like it sounds a bit generic, but I think, having certain archetypes, like you said, a mid-30s mom or a junior 20, junior male or whatever. It's like, of course, everyone's individual, but there are certain repeating trends and patterns and characteristics that you can start to like, okay, I know what I'm in for here. And you kind of learn like how to manage those conversations and how to like steer people the right way.
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of how I feel about like managing someone's emotions on a comp day as well. It's like someone fits into one of a few buckets. Like there's a calm person, there's a sort of middle person, there's a really hype person, there's someone who's really anxious. There's a few different archetypes. Once you've seen one, you've kind of seen them all, and you can relate to previous experiences that you've had, and that's a really, really good starting point. And you can tinker from there.
You mentioned before about like comparison, and you said, lifters will compare themselves and kind of put pressure on themselves. Do you like make an active role? Like, I guess, like the thing that's coming to my mind is like, how do you balance comparison with inspiration? So like, I'll have sometimes an internal battle where I want to inspire my lifters and members, someone who's maybe a little bit pessimistic and they think, they're really new and they'll never squat 60 kilos. And I kind of want to be like, man, like there are women your size that are squatting 150 kilos, 180 kilos. Like you definitely can get to 60 or 80 kilos, whatever your goal might be. But I also don't want them to be to compare themselves and feel like, oh my God, they're so much stronger than me and I could never be like that. Do you feel like as a coach, you have an active role in inspiring someone or try to, I guess, educate them in powerlifting and say, hey, you should go follow Liz Craven or you should go learn about it from this person? Or do you try to refrain from that and let them figure that out themselves?
I do like to let them figure that out on themselves. The things that I will try to get them to follow is like the habits of the best lifters as opposed to the outcomes of the best lifters.
Oh yeah,
because
that's
as we know, like the outcome is almost not really at our, fingertips because of genetics or lifestyle factors or whatever. You can't say to someone, hey, you can be a world champion, because it's not really true. But you can say to someone, hey, you can be as good as you can. You can meet your potential. You can be the best Alex Hayes in the world or the best John Paul Kauke in the world if you do these things that the best lifters do. And that is, being diligent around your training, showing up and being mentally present, and, getting all of your sets done, and, nailing nutrition, nailing sleep, and nailing stress management, and blah, 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 blah. Those habits are going to be far more transferable across people than some sort of like pie in the sky outcome, which again, we can't even actually control the whole thing. Like, you can put in all the work in the world and you can do everything right for 10 years and maybe you never even win nationals. Like, that's very possible that you
didn't get to nationals.
Maybe you never even like make the top 10. It's so possible that that's the case. And that's why the comparison sucks, because some people are just literally built different. And I hate the term built different, but some people are literally just built different. Like, the first day that Kana walked into City Strength, I was like, man, this guy is like, he looks like a superhero and he's totaling 700 at his first comp and like he's 10 kilos lighter than me. Like, now he's totaling 800 kilos. And like, I'm never going to be as strong as Kana. But that's okay, because that's just the reality of it. But I can do the things that Kana does, and I can strive to improve like Kana does, and I can, whatever, those kind of things. You know what I mean?
I like how you said that, doing the things that are going to get you moving forward, being diligent with your diet and rehab and finishing all your sets and all that kind of stuff. What do you say or do when a lifter comes to you and they show you a thing on Instagram or something they saw on YouTube and they said, hey, this person's doing this exercise or this person's doing this rep and set scheme. Should I be doing 3 sets of 3? Should I be doing double back downs? Should I be doing this, that, or the other? Is this what I'm missing? Like someone that's maybe a bit more experienced, a bit more naive, they kind of can much more easily get sucked into like the magic reps and sets or the magic protocol that they're not doing. None of our discussion have we spoken about the right programming, the exact program or the exact thing. You and I are both experienced enough to know that's silly. But how do you manage that when you get your 21-year-old junior client that says, oh, I saw this person doing this, should I be doing that too?
So it's funny because I actually don't really get these types of questions anymore. And I think the reason is for my lifters are bought in. They're bought into the process, like as lame as that sounds, they're bought into the process, TM. And like when I write them a new block, I'll often explain to them why we're doing what we're doing. And if there's anything new in the program, I'll explain to them why it's new. If I've changed an exercise, I'll explain why. And I think that stops a lot of the outside curiosity because they're so focused on what they are doing. They're so bought into the process. They're so bought into the program that they are following that they're not looking for other answers. And I think if, again, like I said before, I'm really lucky that I've been around for long enough that I've got sort of like some street cred that when I say something, people don't question it as much as they used to. When I was starting out, man, I would get questions from every single client I had. Hey, why are we doing this? Hey, why are we doing this? Hey, have you thought about doing this instead? And it gets quite exhausting to try and explain yourself to everyone. But once you have some runs on the board and you've got results for people, those questions come a lot less. And, particularly when I'm starting out with someone, I will make a really, really big effort to explain the program, to explain the decision making, and to explain the nuts and bolts of it all. Almost to, yes, definitely improve the buy-in and get them really, really focused on what they are doing. But also to like stop them from asking me questions like that and stop them from showing me, hey man, should I be doing dips? Like this guy's doing dips. Oh, should I be doing back extensions? This guy's doing back extensions. Because I just don't really actually get a lot of that stuff anymore.
Like you said, you've earned some street cred, you've earned some respect. It's probably a good time to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about process and your, I guess, coaching brand. It started in its infancy many years ago, actually, in a very different kind of way, and it's kind of evolved to now what is Process Powerlifting Club. Talk to us a little bit about like the experiences that you had when you first launched your coaching brand, I suppose, with the other three.
Yeah, so when I first launched, there was 4 of us, and it was just the Process Powerlifting. That was what it was called, Process PL. And I think it was a little bit early to try and bring on like 3 other coaches alongside me, because it was just really, really hard to drill up enough interest to get them all busy. And that was the biggest issue, is and kind of like why those guys fell off, was because like there wasn't enough work to go around, and because the brand was built off of me, the interest came and the interest wanted me, because like I was the brand. And that's something that I really struggled with initially. And yeah, the reason that I brought Claudia on is because I really wanted a female. I wanted to have like one male coach, one female coach. B, I've kind of been mentoring Claudia for a few years, like since I've been coaching her. I've coached her for 3.5 years now. And I really felt like she does a lot of things that I don't do, and she has a lot of characteristics that I don't have. And I wanted to have like a coaching service that could fit literally anybody. And you know, I like to think that I could coach anybody, but the reality is you're not going to get along with anybody. You're not going to get along with everybody. You're not going to be able to help everybody, because you know you can't. But I feel like we actually can now, because I feel like Claudia and I complement each other really, really well, which is awesome. Yeah, and I think since I've brought her on, we've actually had such a big increase in like the number of females who are inquiring, which is really cool. Because previously it was a lot of males who would inquire with me, and the only females that I would get to inquire with me were people who I knew for quite a long time, who knew me as a respected coach, like people like Liz, people like Yanni, people like Zin, who have kind of been aware of who I am for a long time. So as far as like Process Powerlifting Club, like we want it to be like a little community, we want it to be a little club. It is online, but we have quite a tight-knit community that we sort of lean on. And yeah, I'm not really sure what else I can say.
Like, you kind of refer to it as like having a bit of a community, but obviously it's all online, right? Like these people aren't training together. Is there a specific way that you're like facilitating that community? Like, do you have like a big group chat where you're all like sharing your training and stuff? How do they connect with each other, or is it just a bit more ad hoc and they figure it out themselves?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit more ad hoc and they figured it out themselves. We have done some like meetups where we've all met at a gym and had like a big group of us training together at the same time, which has been pretty fun.
Yeah, cool.
And then obviously when we get together at competitions, there'll be a bunch of people in the club who'll come and watch. Even if they don't actually know anyone lifting, they'll just like come and support the team, which is really cool. But there hasn't been anything really like specific. Something that I want to do this year is do a like awards night, which is something that I did like a long time ago before it was called Process, when it was Team Hayes, and we ran the first Team Hayes awards, and we'd never ran it again since because it was COVID, and then we rebranded. But we literally had an in-person awards night where I gave away trophies for like best lifter, most improved, community person of the year, or something else. So I want to do that again. Yeah,
I think that'd be good. That's almost like
come back and win team champs again.
The title of a club, right? Like creating that like kind of club feel.
Yeah,
Alex, it's been great to chat to you. I think it's best we wrap up because we've covered a lot of topics, and we could probably keep going. And I actually do have more dots to touch on, but maybe we can do that for part
Episode
2. Once we get to like 50 episodes or something, maybe I'll have to loop back around and start inviting the same guests back around. So I appreciate your time and all your wisdom, mate. Like I said, I mean everything I've said. I respect you highly, and I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot from the discussion we've just had.
Thank you, man. I feel the same way about you, and I appreciate you having me on. And I'm a bit annoyed that I wasn't the first guest, but hey, it's water under the bridge.
That's all right. Well, maybe you can be like guest number 100 then or something, so that way we can share a milestone together.
Hey, when are you going to put my names up on your shield?
I've already ordered it. I'm just waiting on the company to do it now. I've already paid for it.
So we'll be
as soon as it's done, you'll know. You'll be the first to know.
We'll be coming to Melbourne in October, in like 6 weeks now.
Oh, it'll be done by then. You'll see it.
And if it's not done by then, I'll be disappointed. I want to post a story and be like, I'm on the fucking wall.
Well, the thing is, your name will be up there twice because it'll be listed under coach and under lifter 1 or lifter. I think you're lifter 3 actually. So when I put the order,
what determines the order of lifters?
Like GL points, like lifter 1, 2, 3, 4 is in order of best lifter to worst lifter of the team.
I think I'd be 2.
Yeah, okay. But even when I put the order in, the guy's like, "Do you have the same name twice?" I'm like, "Yep." Is this A Hayes? Is this the same A Hayes? I'm like, yes, it's the same A Hayes twice.
Same guy.
Cool. All right.
Cool, man.
Thank you.